time is a finite resource. And if you don't invest, you are losing a lot of money. If you have your money in a savings account at 1.5%, it will only double around 48 years after that. If you had invested that in, let's say, in an S&P 500, that is the 500 largest companies in the US, at 7%, you would double your money in 10 years. It's so powerful because it's all math. There's no woo-woo here, no art. It's math.
Hi, I'm Mikkel Weber, founder of House of Peregrine. This show is for life abroad and those crafting their life story with intention. I bring you conversations about international finances, meaning-making, relationships, and parenting. I bring on the experts that help you on your journey so that you can connect more deeply with yourself, the people around you, and the place you currently call home. Find out more at houseofperegrine.com, where you can find exclusive guides, products, software, and a community that's waiting to welcome you. Welcome to House of Peregrine. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the House of Peregrine podcast. Today, we're joined by Ana Herrero-Wallace, former U.S. licensed equities trader, investor, author, and the founder of Ada Invest, where she helps professional women across Europe move from overthinking money to building long-term wealth with clarity, structure, and consistent action. She's also the author of the just-released Still Thinking, Act, a practical guide for women who are capable in their careers but want more confidence around financial planning, investing, and the decisions that shape long-term independence. Ana, welcome to the House of Peregrine podcast. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Really excited to be here. So thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you today.
You're welcome. And I had the opportunity to attend your book launch in Amsterdam just a few nights ago. So I was really, really excited to be invited to that. But let's start out from the beginning. Besides writing this gorgeous book that we will link in the comments, tell me about your international journey first, quickly, before we get started.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because some people say, so where are you from? And then I say, I'm Spanish. But am I really Spanish? I have lived in 5 different countries. So I was born and raised in Madrid. Studied in the US, studied finance in the US in Arizona. Then after 5 or 6 years working as an equity trader in the US, I moved to Budapest for 2.5 years where I worked in trading floors as well. And then from there, decided to live in London for nearly a decade where I worked in fintech and technology. And then, you know how it is. Sometimes you fall in love with the right person. And that was in 2012. With the London Olympics, meeting my partner, and he was Dutch. So we had a son in London, and then he convinced me to move to Amsterdam, which was in 2016. Honestly, at the beginning, it was quite hard. I didn't know anyone. I was, it's a bit different than London. So it took me a while. And one of the things that really helped me was to join communities of other international women and then really find my place and really mingle with like-minded women such as yourself.
Yeah. And you know why House of Peregrine is Peregrine, because once you live in different places, Peregrine means outsider. So we say peregrines live on every continent of the world because the bird does, but the word means outsider. Okay. And so if you've lived in 5 different countries, you know how to build a network, you know how to dismantle a network, you know how to make new friends. And you're absolutely right. Finding like-minded is one way, but like kindred spirits who's moved around. If you know, you know, and that just becomes such an anchor when you can meet people who've done it and kind of know the ups and downs of it. So your partner is Dutch, and so you moved to his country. So that's kind of your profile. We have different profiles, right? So there's people who are of the same country and they move to a country together. There's singles, of course. There's couples who move back to the one partner's country, and each of those profiles have their pluses and minuses. But what I found is that that's a pretty big negotiation when you decide to move to your partner's home. How was that for you?
You know, to be honest, I should say it was great and just do it. But I really regretted it. And I have moved. I mean, when I moved to London, I didn't regret it for a second, not even the first day. And moving to Amsterdam was just moving to Amsterdam was it was really different. So first of all, I had one child that was working full time. I had a job that was an hour away from Amsterdam. And, I had the child in childcare for 5 days a week, because we didn't have any family in Amsterdam. And that actually was a little bit shocking for a lot of Dutch women. They were like, oh, are you okay? Is the child okay? Because I know that this is a country, as opposed to everywhere else that I've lived, where women, I think it's around 75% of women work part-time, and also men, but they're not used to having this sort of 5 days a week thing. So that was a bit shocking. It was also, I didn't speak the language. I didn't know anyone really. I knew one person that's at this company, tech company. That's how I got the job. So it was a bit of a shock. And another thing in top of that is that coming from London, that's a financial center, fintech, finance, and that was my thing, and loving all of this, to coming to Amsterdam, where it's a much smaller market. I had to really change my career completely. So then I started working in tech, and I didn't know what on-premise and cloud was back then. So, I mean, it was just really starting from zero. And it went well, of course. Even last year, I took voluntary redundancy, and now I can call myself an author, which is the weird part is, again, I've changed my career to something completely different. And I also, of course, help women with, achieve wealth.
So what I'm hearing you saying is it was a pretty big sacrifice for you to move from London.
Yes.
And so that probably was made. We always talk about the agreements you need to make, and we have all these guides for people, because it can be a make or break moment for some couples if they don't consider it thoroughly. So it sounds like you and your partner figured it out, but it did make it so you had to, or you got to, how do you frame it? It made it an opportunity for you to reimagine what you wanted to do as a career. Do I have that right?
Yes, and it was more of necessity rather than my dream is I've done finance, now my dream is to do tech. It was more of I mean, I've always been interested in, I've done fintech, but it really, the way that, it went was necessity. And then it became, a great career shift. But I mean, if you think about it as a mother of two, I read some data, I will have to pick it up again, but kids will change their careers 23 times or something, We're so used to, our parents having one career, one company, and that is completely different than now. So it's
It's so true. And as international people, and our kids are being raised in multiple countries, that's going to be a reality even more for them. And it's actually a pretty small population of people in the world that have that experience. And I don't know, we talk about it a lot on this podcast about how kids are uniquely positioned to actually be ready for that kind of world. If they're multilingual, if they've lived in multiple countries, changing careers will actually be the norm, as we know. But for our kids who are already living across continents, they'll actually be uniquely prepared for that challenge, I think.
It's good to know that. Yeah, they're resilient, and kids are just incredible.
Yeah, they're already multicultural.
Yeah.
In their brain, in their mindset, they have different compartments, I guess, is what I've
And the
learned.
languages as well, right? So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. But so I want to ask you about, where did your passion come from for investing? The book and your consultancy, after you moved, kind of shifted your career, what made it so where did that passion come from, other than being a woman? Obviously, we're awesome. But like, what is the story? Because there's always a story, a moment that made it so this was your path. What would you say that was?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I think it came from pain, and it came from a place of, let's say, pain. And that was, I grew up in Madrid, and my family was, let's say, rich at the time, or high middle class. Went to a private school. My father had a chauffeur. He had a really nice corporate CFO role. And then he was laid off. And he was around mid 50s or so. And when I was 12, this is what happened. And pretty much after it happened, they closed the doors, and it was all about him and his ego. And so, I don't have the title anymore. I don't have this amazing job anymore. So who am I, right? And my mom was always there, that she didn't work. So it was all, everything was reliant on my father. So it was, it kind of caused pain in somewhere where I thought, okay, if I need money for security, because life is not safe. And from the day of, from one day to another, you can become from having money to being poor.
Would you call that, would you categorize that? Like, I've heard people use the term, and I've done work around this myself, of like a money wound.
Money wound or financial trauma.
Yeah, financial trauma.
Yeah, financial trauma. And and so I was very attracted to, like, okay, how can I get the best job? How can I make money? And how can I be secure and always independent? I don't want to depend on anyone else. So I went to study in the US. I studied finance. And I didn't study finance because I was interested. I studied finance because it was, they had like
Safe.
the highest GPA. I was a good student, got the scholarships there. And then from there was a class actually, a class about investments. And I was fascinated. So we had to analyze companies and then say, would you buy this or that? I can't remember what company it was at the time, but I was completely fascinated. From there, I became an equity trader. So that is stock trading, working for Edward Jones, that is a broker. And I was fascinated with trading.
What did you learn? What did you learn that opened your eyes that you didn't know or that maybe people don't know from working in a trader position?
That it's actually very easy. I mean, and, I talk to a lot of women who haven't made the first step yet of trading, or not trading, that's not the word, but really investing. And it's just so simple, right? I mean, you can download in your phone a trading app and then you can just buy, certain investments. Yeah.
So it seems like a little bit of a black box. And so you kind of got a behind the scenes of how this world works. And so from the outside, it kind of looks like, oh, it's so complicated and just smart people and mostly men do this. And so from your perspective, this is actually not the case. Is that what I'm
No,
hearing?
it's not the case, and it's very simple. And there's this author called Morgan Housel, and he wrote The Psychology of Money, and then he talks very much about finance, how finance is different from other, let's say, like doctors, like medicine has grown a lot, and it's an exponential knowledge. So what we knew 100 years ago is so much less than what we know now, and then it just keeps compounding, right? The knowledge keeps compounding. Finance is a lot more simple. So the problem, I think, with finance is that a lot of very smart men mostly have gone into the world of finance and think that they are smarter than anyone, and then they make things very complex. But in reality, it's a very, very simple, it should be a very, very simple, let's say, subject. And it's really available for all of us. And that's how I wanted to make it. Yes. But you talked
Yeah.
to me
And so
about the passion. Sorry, you talked to me about the passion. I go on a tangent. But yeah, it came from a wound, as you called it, like a wound. And then it became this thing where it was survival. And then I actually started investing in my early 20s. I started investing in stocks and in what we call mutual funds in the US, and really got used to it. And then since 2015, I started investing in real estate. And I realized I'm not a CEO. I've never had a salary of a CEO. Of course, I worked in tech and management, so good salaries, but not necessarily, super tremendous. But I have been very good about investing every month and so forth. So I want to share that knowledge with every woman, because I think it is available for all of us. So that is where the passion came.
it's awesome. We have that in common. I have such a weird path in my career. My 20s were spent investing in tech startups and real estate. Those were my two. And then on real job was working for advertising companies, directing commercials. Like
Okay.
that's my career path. But I get it because that at the time, because of the tech angle in the early 2000s, that was enough to be able to kind of play in this world when there was less risk, when we didn't have kids, when we are able to kind of invest early so that it makes a difference. But it's staggering how often that's not the case. Do you have any statistics on this, especially for women, about how when they make their first investment, if at all?
I don't have particular statistics as to when women start investing versus men, but I do know, and it might have been in the book or not. I can't remember because I had to delete a lot because it was too long, and now it's the right size, is that women make better investors than men. And the reason for this is you could say that we have a bit of imposter syndrome, whereas
A
men are
bit.
over.
I think there's
You probably have
entire thesis written on the fact that
yes.
that's true.
And then you probably, I mean, and it happens. It's really interesting. Imposter syndrome, which is actually in my book, because psychology is so important for money, is it happens to women that are actually very qualified. And then they're like, am I good enough? Or, I probably don't know everything. So then
Then I
I,
can't start.
I
Yeah.
can't start,
And
or, yeah.
these are not like, you're talking about women who are executives in companies.
I
These are
know.
not like we're talking about all women, yes, but it almost doesn't discriminate at any level. Women historically haven't been participating in investing
And there
in
is
like
something
almost.
about the brain. I mean, the brain is different as well. We're wired differently. There's also a very important thing that women have, and men, but I think maybe mostly women, loss aversion. So it's basically the pain of losing is much greater than the win. And this is Daniel Kahneman, and he's a Nobel Prize laureate for the sake called behavioral finance. And he's done studies on what is the pain of losing is a much greater than winning. Therefore, let's not do anything. And one thing I say to all women is, and I talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, I have big savings accounts and I haven't done anything. I say to them, you're also making a decision. Not investing is also a decision. And I think a lot of us think if I don't do anything, then I'm okay. But if you don't do anything, you're also have made already a decision, right? So I think that that's much clearer. But one thing, women make actually better traders and investors than men because we're not overconfident. Therefore, we trade less. When you trade less, you have less transaction cost. And transaction costs are huge. And it's in the book a bit, but it's when you want to invest, when you are in funds, you should look at those transaction costs. You should look at the commissions that you're paying. That could really eat into your investments.
Yep. Yeah. And it's really, there's no reason besides this. There's no gendered reason. It's not a good reason that women aren't in this. So it gives you maybe a lot of energy to think of people making their first investments as women and changing the financial tide for women in the financial world. As you know, I've done a TED Talk about this, about women's lives and how to make them more economically stable in the economy because of the labor that is very gendered across the lifespan of women. And so it is an invisible part of our economy already, but women do need to find ways that the system recognizes to participate in the upside of the markets, because otherwise we know statistically they end up in very bad positions financially, even after working their entire lives building a life. If their marriage doesn't work out, if they have an illness, these are things that women have to think of just as much as men. That hasn't always been the case. And so for me, I watched all the women around me need to stay in marriages or be in really bad positions. And so that's where my passion for this came from, because in our culture, money is power. It's unfortunately a fact, and it's safety. And so I think we all kind of have a safety, a financial trauma as women. And I think collectively, I think the work you're doing and many more is trying to heal that trauma of women not having safety and power in the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So the book, I want to talk to you a little bit about, so you do consulting and you've written this book, but what I know from moving abroad, and you said it at your book launch, is if you live in one country and you move to another one, this gets really complicated pretty fast. So we already have a population of people who aren't investing. Add the complexity of being an international person to the mix. And now you have, it seems, an unending amount of reasons to not invest. What would you
Yes.
tell people about that if you had advice?
Yes, I think it's about, first of all, creating a strategy of what you want to do with money and how you want to live your life, which is something I did with my husband in 2019 to really say, okay, we're going to live until we are 86. That's what I said. Our kids are going to live until certain, let's say, amount of time, and they're going to cost us so much. So we're going to pay for their university or we won't. So just really calculating how much money we need to have in order to retire and then go back from there. And I do know a lot of international people that maybe, especially US citizens that are afraid of investing in Europe. And I know the US filing tax in the US is quite cumbersome and so forth. I always say get a good accountant, or first of all, have a strategy and then get a good accountant, get good people behind you that could really understand your situation and tell you what is possible. And I think what happens, there's a lot of analysis paralysis or people talking to other people and then they just think, oh, I can't do anything. And so they don't invest. And the problem with not investing is that time is a finite resource. And if you don't invest, you are losing a lot of money. I mean, for example, if you have your money in a savings account at 1.5%, it will only double around 48 years after that. If you had invested that in, let's say, in an S&P 500, that is the 500 largest companies in the US, which is an index, which is very easy to buy, at 7%, you would double your money in 10 years. And that is called the rule of 72. And it's so powerful because it's all math. There's no woo woo here, no art. It's math. And I think, yeah, we spend a lot of time thinking about other things, but perhaps we're not really, yeah.
Yeah. And that's a four time return on just leaving it in a different bucket for that same amount of time.
Yes.
So that's just like literally depositing it here instead of here.
Yeah.
And you've just made 4 times your money.
And it's compound interest. I mean, it's not a magic thing. It's compound
explain
interest.
That. Compound interest is actually a really good concept. Would you explain it so everyone can understand?
Yeah, I would have to get my book just to kind of, explain it, because what I explained out is just the rule of 72. But so basically what happens is it's the process where your returns start generating their own returns, right? So it's when you have money invested and you earn interest, not just on your initial return, but also on the accumulated interest over time. And there's a complex formula for that. But what happens is the earlier you start investing, the better. I do have women that come to my masterclasses online and they're like, oh, am I too late to invest? I always say the best time to invest was yesterday. The best time to invest after that is today. So even women in their 50s should start investing if they haven't done that. What's really important with compound interest is that you become consistent, that you are investing every month, that you are investing, that you're not waiting for the right moment. So I also have women working with women that tell me, things are happening, geopolitical problems, in certain countries, wars and things like that. Should I wait to start investing? And I say no. So if you're waiting for the right moment, you're going to miss out on amazing returns. So for me, it was really interesting because even for me, who has a lot of knowledge on this, I remember in 2018, I was thinking, oh my God, the market is going down. I'm going to sell everything. And then that's completely the wrong approach to do it. And somehow I couldn't log into my account and then it became too late. So actually I made amazing returns because I just left it there. And there's data that shows actually that people that have died, or that have lost their password are actually the best investors because they have left it. Yeah. There's the data on this.
They make the best returns.
Yeah, the best returns because you just put your money there and then you forget about it. And I love reading the Financial Times, but I don't read it so that I can make better investments or that I can buy the next stock. I read it because I'm generally interested. But that's the great thing about finance as well, is like once you do 3 things, you automate your investments, you can just dedicate your time to things that you really are passionate, like doing podcasting for you, for example.
Yeah. And, it really is. I always love to so I spent a few years heavily into the crypto markets, not as a day trader or something, but just being interested in it like fashion. I always say crypto is a lot like fashion. And so I kind of got to have that impulse, but it was with money and different coins. And I was really good at picking what was going to go up and down. And I wasn't doing it as an investment. It was more of an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
But women, again, were doing better there too, because they can feel what's going on in the market. And so I always want to encourage women. I think it really is getting started. I wish there was something that was as easy as like social media to just get started. You know what I mean? And it's not that women are not as good at these things, but these heavy, it feels like you can get started the wrong way somehow. Yeah. And so what do you tell people, if they just want to say they have 10 euros a month or $10 a month, starting small is better than not. You can have $100,000 too. But if someone said, you know what, I want to start investing, I can put aside 50, 100 euros a month. What do you usually recommend if it's a small amount, but they want to put it away consistently every month? Is there a place or a couple places you can tell them to go to where they can just do a simple bank transfer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is easy apps that you can download on your phone. And I would always recommend, you would have to see what the profile of that person is. So for example, let me ask you a question. So how well would you sleep at night? Let's say you want to invest 50 euros and you're at the start of your career. So, no kids, but the start of your career, it's quite uncertain. You're renting. I don't know. I'm just making a scenario up here. How would you feel about investing money and then seeing that the numbers go red, that they're going lower? How would you feel about it? Like, would you sleep well at night or would you have a problem?
I'm 20. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
22.
Because now I know to leave it alone.
Yeah.
Like I don't do that sort of thing. But I know there is a psychology around it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with an app. But when I started investing, it was with, like Vanguard in
Which
the
is
US.
great. This is great. Yeah.
But it's kind of like an old institution. You kind of had to do a lot of paperwork up front. Yeah, it's very heavy, if that makes sense. And then once you get it set up, it's fine. That initial,
Okay.
there's got to be easier ways than when I started doing it 40 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, there is many apps, right? The Giro and Saxo Trading and, they're all quite similar. And I get a lot of questions as to what is the best app. I don't know. Yeah, they're
Well,
all
I want to know,
different.
what should
Yeah.
someone look for in an app?
Well, so I would, and this is why I'm asking you, how would you sleep at night about it? But depending on what you answer to me, I would just say invest in like 3 funds, Vanguard or iShares. They're very low commission, and invest
So
in the
low
US.
commission is one thing.
Low commission is
Low
super
commission is one.
one
Yep.
thing.
Okay.
Diversification is another one.
Okay. Perfect.
And then
And so
good
the
funds, right?
fees are,
So the fees are super important. We're talking about compound interest. So 1% or 2% interest, it could be thousands of euros
yep.
over time. Yeah.
Okay. So those are 2 really good tips. So look for low commissions.
Yes.
And then the second one was
Diversification. So being diversified, not buying, I do have individual stocks. That is more just a bit of gambling, a bit of speculation.
Yeah.
It's just fun money
Yep.
that you can lose. But really
Yep.
have a long-term approach, invest in 1 or 2 funds consistently, regardless of the market. And you're saying crypto for you was like fashion, which is I wrote it down because I love it. But what's interesting about trading is a little bit the opposite of when we go shopping and, you buy the sweater and then the sweater is at a discount. You go, "Ooh, I'm going to buy it. It's at a discount." The market is different. And you're also talking about psychology. So if the market is going down, people don't want to buy it. If it's going up, people want to buy it. So it's completely opposite psychology
Yeah, than fashion, than shopping for
than
clothes.
shopping. Yeah.
Yeah, but once you get that, and there's 2 types of investing, right? There's the ones where you kind of watch the market, but what I would venture to start with for most women is just put a little bit away every month in something and just leave it there.
And you're absolutely right. But one thing that is important, it depends if you're self-employed or if you're employed by a company, is to have an emergency fund, and also whether you have a partner. Especially with uncertain times, companies are doing layoffs due to they want to save costs. They're taking other jobs to countries where they pay a lower wage. So many people are losing their jobs. Do you have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months if you're employed? And maybe if you're self-employed, having that a little bit higher than 6 months. And then the rest, invest. Right. So, and then of course have a fund where you have, but it's also very important that you know how much money you're spending a month. So what are
Yeah.
your expenses? Yeah.
And that's for the household. But I always try and get, and this is what I'll tell my daughters to do, is to have their own investment account
Yes.
that's outside of the family, that's outside of the emergency funds, that's outside of everything, especially if they decide to have children, because it puts you in it doesn't matter if you marry the best partner in the world, he has the best job in the world, you have the best job in the world. Women, whether we like it or not, are uniquely fragile financially. Even if they're the breadwinner, it doesn't matter. Like, to have an account that is uniquely yours, that's compound interest that you have access to, is the advice that I always give women. Not to hurt their partner, not for any other reason besides you are inherently more financially fragile, whether we like to admit that or not. And so that's kind of what first step for most women is like, have money of your own that's for your future. And that would be that putting away $50 a month or 100 or whatever, despite anything else going on in the family, it's just for you. And that's what I always tell people as my advice when they get married.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank about this, I'm engaged. I've been engaged for 9, 10 years. That's a different story, different podcast. I'm not married yet, but I do have my own account. So I have my own account. I've always worked anyway. And then we have a joint account where we do, the joint expenses of the kids, the family, the house, and so forth. So yeah, absolutely agree with you that women need to be financially independent and then have,
And that's independent if you are working for money or not, I think. So I think that's one of my goals, is to make that the new normal,
yeah, I
is
love that.
that.
Yeah.
But sometimes that can be hard to get started, especially we know statistically, especially people our age or my age, that usually men are still in charge of the finances at a high level. And so that's why I'm asking for this in point. And that's probably what you help people do with your consultancy. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a customer who is a lady who just recently got divorced, and she was relying on her partner. She's now at her mid 40s. She never had to learn investing. And now she finds herself with a substantial amount of money in crypto that she cannot take out because she doesn't understand it. But he didn't invest in anything else other than that. So that's the situation. If we rely on someone else, then things break out and you haven't learned anything in, let's say, 45 years, and then you try to learn. It's a bad situation. It's a little bit like networking. You should network when you don't need to network. And then, it's a difficult situation for many women. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's a little bit like division of labor, right? So women often take the unpaid and unupside labor. And again, this is changing. We all hope it is, but it hasn't changed that much since my mom and me. That's not changing fast enough. And so when women take over the majority of unpaid labor as a contribution to the household, and men are in charge of the finances and the upper level planning for financial, just learning how the system works, that is just what I think would be nice to see change over time. So is your consultancy a little bit like financial school? Is that kind of how you would?
Well, there's an education piece, but there's also a very important piece of understanding, first of all, what are your dreams, short term, mid-term, long term? Let's create a
So
financial plan for you. Yeah.
life
So
planning. Yep.
life planning. So exactly how much money are you spending? How much money can you be investing, and where to invest? And then creating a system, a bit like the book of Atomic Habits, creating a system that is completely dumb proof in the sense that you don't have to think about it anymore. You don't have to have the anxiety of reading news to try to day trade or be smarter than anyone else. Once you create the system, you automate it. Also, one thing I do is look at pensions. This is something we don't talk about enough, but what is your pension doing? Where are they invested? Is that the correct? Is it is it the correct thing? I also talk to a lot of entrepreneur ladies, and they don't have a pension yet. And they're like, oh, do I need a pension? Well, yes, it's tax efficient. You do need a pension. So I think that that's also a quite important. Holding hands. A lot of my customers also work for other companies where they get options and they get a lot of equity from the company. One of them that I was just talking to has 32% of her wealth in just one company, which is the company she works for. And this could be again the Enron story of I lose my job, the company goes to zero the shares, and then I lose my wealth. So, making and these are very, very smart women who just somehow didn't get into investments, or they're just scared, or they have some sort of story like I had a story, and they just haven't done it, and they feel silly asking the questions, right?
Yeah. Well, and money is, like you said, ones and zeros. It's math, but it is emotional. That is something that, a lot of people talk about how money is energy. It's a lot of
Yeah.
things, but it is the fuel that runs your life. Whether we want to believe it or not, some people have stories about money being evil. Some people have stories about rich people being corrupt, or, one person shouldn't have that much money. And women have those stories statistically more often than men. And so those money stories, do you help people work through their money stories? Is that part of what you help them do?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I think it's important that we share those stories. And I sometimes do that with the dinners that I organize where women open up their stories. Not necessarily I have this much money and I make that much money, but it's more like, okay, this is how I grew up. And it's good to understand what are your self beliefs and self limitations. So for the book, actually, I interviewed 50 women, and one of them said to me, I bought a house in Amsterdam, but I couldn't believe it was me. Like I thought it wasn't meant for me because I'm not rich. I've never been rich. So it's someone else's story, right? So it's those narratives.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, that people understand their limiting beliefs.
You said the book. I'm going to hold it up again.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous book.
Thank you.
Still Thinking Act.
Yes.
Tell me about the title. It sounds like what we're talking about for women all the time.
Yes. Well, I mean, the titles changed so many times. So that was the stressful part. But I got this because it's like you're still ruminating. You're still thinking, I know I need to be investing. I know I need to optimize my portfolio. I have been investing, but I just don't have the time or don't want to do it. So it's like act. And I think it's with many things in life, I want to do this or I want to do that, and then you're not acting. Obviously, this is a smarter money for women. So it's really with the investment part, but how can you, and one thing about the book, again, it was 50 people I interviewed, and it was beautiful to get their stories of money stories. And then, so there's 3 characters in the book, 2 women, 1 man, and how they progress. And also there is a lot of data. So it's not just this narrative, but there's a lot of data on it. And there's some exercises that people can work through in order to understand their money story, in order to understand what's holding them back or to optimize things.
That's amazing. And I love that. I started reading it. And thanks for
Thank
giving
you.
me one. But I love that you've mixed that in, because we do know also women read less nonfiction than men do. So that's another really great addition. So what you've woven here is something that's very tailored to women in particular, not because they're not very good at trading, just because the narratives haven't, surprise, surprise, been written with them in mind. I love that. I wanted to ask you, because you said something at your launch that you are targeting women in Europe, because most books about this sort of thing are tailored towards the US market. And so tell me a little bit about that. I thought that was so smart.
Well, I mean, I've been reading, I love finance. I've been listening to podcasts on finance for decades now and reading. I am a nonfiction reader
Me
myself.
too. I'm a nonfiction reader too.
Okay. I'm both. I'm on holiday, I'm fiction, and then everything else, I'm nonfiction. But, I was a little bit, sorry.
No, sorry. I'm like 99% nonfiction.
Yeah. You and I need to share some books.
Yeah, of course. No, but you were saying, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. But I was I let it go for a long time because I lived in the US. So I understood what the problems were there with healthcare, education. You know how it is in the US. So it's a huge cost of university. They have a healthcare crisis, the least I can say is a crisis. People driving cars that are expensive that they're leasing, and people are living in credit card debt. And you've lived in many countries, so have I. It's not really the problems that we have in Europe. Yes, I mean, of course, people are in debt in Europe, but we don't have those problems. And so, you read all these books, and the examples are very similar as well. They're very US-centric. It's normally males, and it's all, And so I didn't feel completely identified. It's also US problems. The interest rates are different. And I thought, okay, I have to write something that is for European women. And it's not specific to any country, but all the examples, I did the utmost I could to get all the examples from Europe.
Nice. Yeah. And what would you say the difference? I mean, is that the difference in the markets? So interest rates and the fact that people just use money differently in different continents.
Yeah. And I mean, I also think there's a different thing in the US. Europe tends to be more about community. So helping each other and whatnot. I'm not saying that the US is not like that, but the US is more individualistic. And I think we see money differently. Even Holland and the US are quite different. Like in Holland, it's not normal to display wealth the way that it could be in the US. They're much more open about it, which also has pros and cons. I love that perhaps in the US, it's not so much of a taboo. You know me. I mean, we've known each other, talked to each other a little bit. I like talking about money, right? It's something uncomfortable. I like to share and I like to learn from others, but it is more of a taboo in Europe. But yeah, it is quite different. Whilst we're human, I think that there is a bit of differences. And of course, yeah, the healthcare, the education, transportation costs, everything is just slightly
Yeah.
different.
And that's money that can be invested in Europe if it's not spent the same way. And so that makes it a very unique opportunity for, if you're able to have some of those costs taken care of by universal health care and low transportation costs in Europe, it's an opportunity to spend some of that investing. So it's a really important point, and time is your biggest lever, as they always say. Those are my two takeaways from what you're saying is,
Thank you.
again, don't beat yourself up over not investing, but get started because, again, time's the biggest lever that you have. And so, like, I loved how you said people who lost their passwords are the best investors
That
statistically.
is true.
That's really,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And so, is there anything you can tell people? There was a story, maybe it was in your book, about a woman who moved from South Africa and
Mm.
she moved to Europe and had money and she just left it in a bank account because she didn't know what else to do. So tell us that sometimes happens and tell us
Yeah. And
about that a little bit.
this is my friend Heidi Custers. She's a director at a fintech company. But basically, 5 years ago, she moved from South Africa to Amsterdam. And South Africa has a huge inflation, and the South African rand, but also had a lot of instruments where she could buy and they have a big interest. Let's say they pay a big interest. So she would put in a savings account and, they pay, I don't know how much percentage. Whereas if you do it in Europe, or at least, it's 1.5, if that. So she was used to just putting her money somewhere passive and then getting interest. Of course, you have the depreciation of the currency. So when she moved to the Netherlands, she didn't know what to do because she was just used to putting in a savings account and realized that the savings account here weren't paying what she needed. So she left it in cash just because she didn't know what to do. So I think that that's the thing. She was used to one thing and she tried to apply it in a different country and it just didn't work. And that's the thing that we need. And like you're talking about, the people that listen to this podcast are normally people that are moving from one place to another and things are different.
Yeah, money is cultural. We always say on this podcast, like, money's cultural just like anything else. So in South Africa, it sounds like the culture is you have a pretty easy place in a savings account to at least gain some interest that's meaningful. Whereas in Europe and US, there's another layer. So there's savings accounts, but those are not incentivized. Those are not places to make a return. There's a whole other system, which is what we're talking about, investing in, that makes it so that the interest is meaningful over time. So it's almost like your money's being rented,
Yes.
if you could say it that way.
Yes.
So when you walk up to someone, do you ever say, let's talk about money?
All the time. My friends get annoyed. I even do it with men too, and they're like surprised sometimes. But I do it. I love talking about it. Not necessarily how much money do you make, let me show off, or none of that. It's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about, okay, what can I learn from you? And yeah, so it is something that I'm very comfortable. But again, it's about what steps do I need to take in order to run the marathon. And starts with doing the 200 meters and the 500 meters and the kilometer until you get to that, half marathon and marathon. So yeah, I think
It's
we
the,
should open it up.
it's the same skill. I always say, so there's the skill that women have. It's called community building or creating. So
Thank
like
you.
when your kid needs to go to kindergarten for the first time or they start school, you start talking to other moms about the schools and other dads and other parents, and you get advice and you learn the tricks of the trade, if you will, of the schools in your area. And then when there's, again, here, there's like the middle bar school lottery, or there's a private school, like women have this skill of asking, learning systems applied to finances. It's like a match made in heaven. Like, I can't stress enough how I know that women have the skills, more than enough skills, to invest that they can apply and be very successful. So the community building skills and the fact finding missions you do to get your kids in activities is much more rigorous than it is to get started with investing.
Absolutely. And like you're saying, we learn from the community. Oh, and it's funny that I'm a mom as well. I've talked about a lot of stuff But then, I talk about money, but most women don't. And it's like, wait, this could be a skill that we are teaching each other. And why are we not talking about it? And men do it a lot more, right? So like they're just doing the barbecue and then they're talking about their money investments. And why are we not doing it? So yeah, it needs to break.
Why
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't women talk about money, do you think?
Well, I think it's we're brought up that way. It's also different cultures are, it's taboo or it's tacky or, I
Intimidating. I think some people think
intimidating or
it's intimidating.
bragging. Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
also perfection. Like it was a little bit with like the book. Do I have the perfect title? I need to keep editing my book. I'm not going to deliver because it has to be perfect. And maybe there's also that thing of I don't want to be judged, for saying the wrong thing, perhaps.
Can I bring something else up about
Sure.
it that maybe I've been married a really long time, almost 25 years,
Good for
and
you.
I feel like I will I thank you, but I
Yeah.
think I'm trying to change that narrative too. It's like
Okay.
longevity does not equal success. But
Yeah.
the thing that I noticed about myself was that because it was a reflection on him,
Hmm.
I wasn't allowed to talk about it socially
Right.
because money was a reflection socially in our social construct.
Mm.
Even if I was a breadwinner, it would still mean that like in our patriarchal cultures, this is just true. But if someone asked me like who decorated my house, I could go
Hmm.
on and on and on about details because it was more of a reflection on me. And I
Mm.
don't like that that's the social construct we live under, but I
Right.
wonder if that's holding some women back, is that whether they're doing well or not well could be seen as a reflection on their partner if they're in a heterosexual marriage or a
Right. So
relationship.
are you saying that if I was talking about money to other couples, that would reflect bad on my partner? Because then it
I
looks
wonder,
like I'm too bossy and I'm just doing that
no,
bossy,
could
or would
be.
it be?
Yeah, could be. Or if they're trying to learn about money, it's
Yeah.
like a reflection on their husband not doing a good job or something.
Right.
I think,
Interesting.
I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just think there's social construct reasons because women will go on and on and on about things that they have domain over and
Yeah.
talk about it with each other. But in this case, it seems a little bit more blended of
Yeah.
again,
Because
socially.
it's almost like they wouldn't ask your husband about the house decoration. They wouldn't ask you about the investments, which is just an assumption because it might be that you're doing the investments and he's doing the
Absolutely. Yep.
decoration. There isn't anything wrong with
Yeah.
that. But if you talk about the investments, it looks like you're like he's not manly enough or he's not the one making. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm lucky enough. I mean, my husband knows me by now in that regard. He was at the launch. He completely supports all this, right? He knows how annoying I am about this subject. But thank you for sharing that because that's a very nice observation. Yeah.
I just wonder about that sometimes. That
Yeah.
and people are different levels of comfortable disclosing about money because money is such a, it's almost like you'd talk about so many other things, but money's almost a taboo. It's like you don't talk about religion and money in the US at least.
Yeah.
And so there's such a taboo sometimes
Politics.
around it as well. And if you are coupled, you might have different levels of candor around a subject like that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems also. I mean, one thing is you and I talking about money, which we can. There's another problem I see, which is couples not talking about money, which is not something I completely focus on the book. So it was more for the women. There is
Yeah.
some stories about the partners. So there is something on that, but you better have those conversations before you get married. You better have a prenup because if you don't have a prenup, you have a prenup, but this is a government prenup, right? So you better have those conversations and really find out who your partner is because if you're a big spender, he's not, or vice versa, there's going to be some frictions. And data have shown, and I think I cut this out of the book because it was just too long on that regard, but data has shown that, money has been one of the main problems of couples separating and getting divorced, right? So it's a very, very important conversation to have.
Yeah. And you know what I advise couples to do before they move abroad or move to another country is to have another prenup.
But yeah, good one.
So
If yeah, prenups are
because
amazing.
because value travels, so a lot of times people change roles when they change countries.
Yeah.
So if you had a career, both of you had a career here, when you move
Hmm.
abroad, sometimes it's for one. So a renegotiation of value needs to happen every time you go through that sort of thing, not just about money, but about how value is created in your house. And so I always like to advise people to have those. I mean, negotiation skills are needed in marriage. Like that's just the way it is. But knowing who your partner is and how you align on money is super important. However, that's why I really want women to have their own account, because money can be used in all sorts of ways that we can't anticipate. Again, even in the best experience, like in the best marriages,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't see things the same way. And having that your own account is super
Yeah,
important.
it's really interesting with my interviewing of women. There was a story, it didn't come to the book, but it's a story that I tell.
I love these background stories we're getting. Do tell.
Background stories, yeah. I couldn't do everything, but there's a story I have of someone I interviewed who is a very, very smart woman, accomplished executive, but her husband at the time was keeping all the passwords and accounts away from her because he thought he knew better. He thought, oh, I know how to invest better than you, so I'm not going to do that. And as she was
Yeah.
getting more and more literate in finance, she was saying, hey, I want to invest in index funds. He's like, leave it to me. You don't know what you're doing. And it ended up being that they got divorced. And then, so it happens. It's not physical abuse, but it is financial abuse where, even smart women are getting, or men, it could be a woman doing it to a man as well. But, there's all these stories, which are fascinating with money, and it's a way of controlling people as well.
Yeah, it is. It's a power. And that it just can't be denied. It's not like, I don't even think sometimes men even do it on purpose. It's like I said, it's just this cultural thing sometimes that gets out of hand if you're not involved. And that's why I love what you're doing, because again, it's a literacy we need, like being able to make a meal or being able to drive a car or ride a bike. Like, you need to know about money. It's a life skill. It's not something to outsource. Even if you aren't in the day to day of it, it really is a essential life skill, I think. And that's what you're getting to in your work. And that's what you're doing in this great book. And so
Thank
I
you.
hope that people will take the time to read this book, especially if you're moving countries, and consider, like you said, the agreements you're operating under, who, if you are partnered, your partner is, and also what your values are, because money is the lifeblood of our lives, whether or not we want to admit it. And when we're doing it across cultures, it's even more important to have these agreements and this clarity, I think. So yeah, I love what you're doing. Tell me, is there anything we haven't covered that you would love to tell people?
Well, if people want to continue the conversation, they can check me out at adainvest.co. I think you'll leave it in the comments. But I do online masterclasses, and I cover what we call the wealth framework. So I have a framework of wealth, and that is W for worth, E for earnings, A for assets, L for lifestyle, T for time, H for habits. It's nice to continue that conversation. You read the book. You don't have to read the book. Come over, see us online, and then I create some dinners every once in a while. And then we also
Invite me to your dinners.
Yes, I will. I will. Yeah, it's good that we sit on the table and then we meet each other. Networking is very important, as you know, but it's also important that we talk about money and what sort of, just break the taboo and then exercise that. And then, of course, people can get a call with me for free and then just understand whether there's a match and if I can help and mentor them financially. That's how I like to call myself, a mentor on finance, and just, make the investment now, forever. So that's
Yep.
how I see it.
I love what you said. The best time to invest was yesterday, but the next best time is today.
Yes.
Yeah. And especially as international women and people, we really need to be strategic about how our finances are going. And this is a great place to start if you have not started your financial journey.
Yes.
Anna, thank you so much for joining me today. I love what you're up to in the world. I love the
Thank
book.
you.
I hope everyone checks it out.
Thank you.
And we will put all of your contact info in the show notes. Thank
you
you
so
to our
much.
audience. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the House of Peregrine podcast today. You can check out everything we're up to at houseofperegrine.com. Follow us on all the platforms at House of Peregrine. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed our show. For the latest insights on living internationally, join us at houseofperegrine.com to find out how you can connect with our community. Let's craft our life story with intention together.